Hi, everybody. I first off like to start out by appreciating some of the really important comments from Adrian and Carl in the last segment that I really do agree wholeheartedly that without a massive showing of public support for a ban, it won't happen. Without demanding what you actually want, you'll not only get less, you probably won't get anything, or not much. That's really going to be central. The other piece, and what we are here to talk about is, well, do we start one community at a time? Well, you have to start somewhere. You have to actually start in a specific place. And that means with a specific municipality to get a specific ordinance adopted, a ban ordinance. And so it is by default one at a time. It can't be one standing alone. That just isn't going to work. It's got to be something where we have communities beginning to assert that they can assert their authority, their rights. I know that I talk about the denial of the right to make those decisions. And I would agree that there are some differences between New York under home rule authority and some other states in the Marcellus Shale region. I am concerned too that that may not long be the case. Under home rule, using land use laws, zoning laws, I would agree that there is some wiggle room for some of the communities in New York State to use the land use laws to effectively ban the drilling, to zone it out. In other places, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, to attempt to do that would be, according to the state, circumventing the state's sole authority, and land use laws can't be used that way. At the moment, I think that there is some opportunity for some communities, and especially as was pointed out, that have shown prior interest, with comprehensive plans and so forth that show that, yeah, this has been our intent. This is the direction, this is the vision we have for our community. I think that's a good thing, and I agree that it should be used. And so ordinances of that sort in New York communities attempting to sustain their rural character makes sense. I would suggest that on top of that, putting a factual ban in place based on rights also makes sense. Not just because I want to make sure everybody does it my way. It's not about that. It's about what kind of an argument do you have. Talk about being clear about your intent beyond a comprehensive plan, which is good. That's the vision that a community has for its future. Putting that in place and using the existing land use laws for New York, that's fine. What about being real clear that we understand that this is also based on fundamental rights, and that should the land use laws, the zoning laws, be changed at the state level, which can be done, so that home rule authority does not allow you to effectively zone out the drilling. If that happens, and it does happen, it's the kind of change in law that we've seen time and time again. When an industry says, this is where we're going, this is our vision, and municipalities that at the moment have the authority to enact laws to stop us, we're going to go to the legislature, use our authority there, our influence there, and put in place laws that limit or eliminate that local authority. I can't guarantee that's going to happen, but I've seen it happen over and over and over again on various issues. Gas drilling, as lucrative as it is for these industries, I wouldn't think would be left out of that historical process. But yeah, one at a time, not one, not a couple. We need to turn this into a building movement. It's got to get legs. It has to have momentum. And I think that means that if we're going to have a movement, if it's going to be a massive movement to push, to change, to prevail on the courts to come up with different decisions that actually reflect the interests of the people, that is going to put pressure on the legislature not to pass those laws that restrict our local authority, and in fact to put in place statewide laws, like a ban, like exactly what the people in our communities want. In order for that to happen, we're going to have to pull together. I agree, we have to work together. I don't necessarily think that means that we try everything and have a scattershot strategy, because it's not, well, let's take the example of the winners. Corporations don't do that. They have a pretty simple strategy. It's, we're going to make as much money as we can, no matter what, and it doesn't matter what you say and what rights you seem to have or claim to have. We have to push back with as focused a strategy to say, we have the rights, we're asserting the rights. You're going to have to come in and take them away from us. And I don't say that lightly, blithely, but it's the kind of thing that energizes and motivates and inspires people to act. When folks went into Woolworth lunch counter and sat down, they weren't going in there simply with the intention of saying, you know, the law is horrible. Yeah, they knew the law was horrible. It was depriving them of a fundamental right. But they simply walked in and they acted on the premise they already had the right. Hi, I'm hungry, I'd like lunch. A pretty simple, basic request that other folks with different complexions could perform without doubt that they had the right to do it. We need to act on that kind of certitude and say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ban this in every community we can. And when one community is attacked and the people there told, sit down, shut up, the only folks that have rights here are the investors and board of directors of the drilling corporation, what happens? What happens is that people seeing this happen in public are inspired to stand up and say, well, wait a minute. We do have those rights, and we're going to do that here. That what I'm suggesting is, without drawing the corporate response, without actually being so bold as to make them come in and say, you don't have those rights, we can't generate the kind of grassroots effort and movement that we're after. And I don't say it because I want to have confrontation or that I think that's a wonderful thing, but it's about what's going to work strategically. And if we nibble around the edges, and if we try to say, well, not every community is going to get saved because some aren't going to be able to use the land use laws, not everybody's going to be able to assert their rights. I mean, it looks like statewide zoning to me. The fact that we don't do it at the local level and surrender portions of our community because in New York, gee, you can get away with exclusionary zoning, doesn't mean that we're not zoning in effect. We're saying, well, we're going to surrender parts of our state to the industry where those poor souls really don't have the tools that we do in our community. Asserting rights means that everybody gets them. Everybody gets them.
Let me add a couple of comments to that. I agree completely, asserting rights is something that everybody has. I would probably put some of the emphasis a little bit different. I mean, I don't think that the local ban ordinances in the towns are just wiggle room exactly. I think that they, first of all, it applies, I think, statewide to all towns. Can do this, and yeah, they need to have a comprehensive plan and so forth, but this road is open to all towns, and it's obviously particularly relevant to rural towns because that's where the drilling is going to be. You know, the drilling is not going to be in the center of Ithaca, probably, although we do see this in Texas and other places. But so, you know, but it is going to be, you know, in the town of Middlefield or in the town of Otsego or in the town of Afton or any number of, and so I don't want anyone to get the impression that this is a sort of marginal thing. I think this is a very central, this is the one tool that exists right now that we actually have to use to stop fracking. There are other tools which we would have to create to stop fracking. So we have the additional step of creating those tools by and large. But here's a tool that's in hand. So I think it's very important to use it. And the other thing is that, the oil companies the gas companies have to develop intensively, as we know. They have to cover an area. It's not profitable for them to have one well here and another well there. So one of the things that this local ordinance things does, it breaks up the checkerboard of the gas companies, and it makes it really difficult for them to blanket an area completely. So essentially, if you don't have to get every single town. You can get a few towns here, a few towns there, and suddenly life is miserable for the gas companies. And it's true, I suppose, home rule could be taken away. Anything can be taken away by the legislature. But I think in this climate, with the big head of steam that's up about this issue, that seems rather unlikely right now to me. And also remember, the Republicans like home rule. This is something, it's one of their pet things. They, local, libertarian, home rule, and so forth, there's a lot of sympathy on the other side for that particular approach in some ways. And so these are just things to keep in mind.
Are we finished up for time? No. Okay. Yeah, and I would second most of that.
But the rights are, I would agree about establishing the rights.
I don't think we differ on that at all. I think that but it is more than emphasis as I see it, and that is that there's a underlying message we send based on what strategy we use, and the underlying message. Yes, just to be clear, if you have a tool like your community can use the zoning powers and effectively eliminate drilling, then you should do it. I'm not saying don't. The question is that the direction to go statewide with every community? The problem I see is the subtext, which says that the state has eliminated our authority to say no to drilling through all of the other laws. The courts have found out that carve out in the zoning powers under home rule that says, well, you're not regulating the industry and saying, here's the type of casings to use and the rest of it. You're not doing that, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. And what I'm saying is if there was actually a valuable sort of regulation, and I'm not saying there isn't such a thing, it would be in the hands of the people affected by the industry being regulated, and not something negotiated at the state level where they negotiate away parts of your rights, your right to self-determination in your community. The subtext I'm suggesting is by saying we acknowledge that the law, all the rest of the laws that are on the books, well, they're valid. They've stripped us of our authority to deal with this industry in any other way but through land use laws, see if we can't squeeze it out. And we're looking for loopholes, and we're looking for lucky breaks, and we're hoping that the legislature stays on our side and doesn't get talked out of it, but we're acknowledging that they have the authority and the right to get talked out of it and to surrender that last little loophole.
I don't think the local ordinance is not a loophole.
No, I don't think it is either.
No, you don't.
I don't think it is either. No, I agree. What's the loophole? The ordinance isn't the loophole, but the one last legal avenue for saying no to the drilling indirectly, not directly saying no. That's the loophole. Because if we actually had the rights we claim we have, there wouldn't be a loophole. We wouldn't be relying on that loophole. It would be very clear that we could simply say no to the drilling. And without asserting that, we are going to, in the end, surrender some communities that don't successfully establish that type of an ordinance.
We could clearly have a very interesting debate here probably all afternoon. But we are saying the local ordinance laws, just to be clear, is saying no. And there's a certain irony, I think, in what if the state has sort of taken away all the other regulatory aspects of this and has left towns only with the option of saying no, well, by God, that's exactly what we want, isn't it? Just say no, as somebody once said.
And as I say, you should do that. We're not differing. The message is, and the message we should send if we're going to inspire a movement and not simply inspire a few communities to use the tools, then in order to inspire the movement, that's the message. That's why the message is important and why it has to be precise and it has to be clear. And you don't inspire people over zoning. You inspire them over rights.
I think that what that leaves us with feeling is that there's now there's a disconnect. What is the physicality? What is the practical nature of we've got a room full of people here. We don't have a television station. We can work at a town level. How do we mobilize a whole state?
Well, the towns, once you get a couple of towns to actually do this.
Zach's asking.
Oh, okay.
I'm okay to share the answer there, but and I think that we're on the same wavelength here, if I'm not mistaken, which is that it's about getting one community to say, we're going to be the first, and that's actually usually the hardest. Everybody else says, well, if somebody else does it, I might, right? Getting the first community to do it, and the second to say, well, they did it, we'll try it. It's about a snowballing effect. How do we get it to the state level? Because frankly, I don't want to be going from municipality to municipality until the day I die. No. That's not a good strategy. We do need it to get to the state level. We need to get it to the federal level. We need it to be recognized that communities have a fundamental right to self-determination on these issues that impact their lives and everything about their community. Getting to that point means inspiring people. Sitting down at the lunch counter was never going to change Plessy versus Ferguson or separate but equal. It was never going to change it if it only happened at that one Woolworth's and nobody ever heard about it. As a kid growing up in Philadelphia during that time and looking at the news, black and white TV, it had an impact on me. I can only speak personally. Seeing what happens when people assert rights and then they're publicly denied those rights inspires other people to demand those rights and stand up for them. And that's, I think, how you get it to the state level.
It was one lunch counter, and then maybe it's one town, but I think it's the same kind of dynamic. So it's a matter of getting publicity and getting the word out about what's actually happening, if it happens. We hope it'll happen soon. And
risking saying, come and get us. Our rights we're asserting them. We're not going to surrender them. We're not going to take no for an answer.
I'm asserting my right to ask a question. Supposedly there's a bill that has to do with home rule that Bonasek is co-sponsoring that would strengthen the home rule law. How much do you know about this?
Well, I know a little bit about it, but probably people here know more. Jack, do you know about this bill? Are you going to?
I can't speak to it right now, no.
I have a vague recollection of reading about it.
It's Barbara Lifton is, I believe.
Introduced it, right?
Yeah,
and
it's Barbara Lifton's bill.
It would give municipalities the right to regulate oil and gas. It would change the law, basically, on that.
It would keep the prohibition.
Right, it would clarify, exactly. It would
clarify.
Because we do have it.
We often have to be careful about what such legislation says, because sometimes it will look like a reaffirmation of the right of local control to say where the drilling can happen. Well, if that becomes law, you just lost your ability to say no to drilling through the zoning, because you can say where it can happen, but not whether or not. If that's what the language is, you got to look at it closely.
I agree with the statements in terms of this should be community-based right organizing. What I'm seeing on the ground out there, this is an incremental process of moving from ordinance to ban in these townships. I do, however, have much more faith in this process when you get one town to go to that point. It encourages a lot of bordering towns to take much more rapid action. So it's not, as Ben would, I think as you presented it necessarily, Ben, that you're picking off one town at a time. You're getting that one town to be courageous and take the step, and then you're getting a lot of other towns to join. It's like you would think as you're getting individuals to see that reaction that you talk about in rights, building a movement. We're seeing that in towns now, and that's happening upstate. It's happening down where Adrian is. It's happening all across the state. So I think this urgency. You may have this multiplying factor that's coming around these towns coming to that ban decision, and I think that's where we have to concentrate our efforts.
Yeah, I think that, Jack, that really is my intent. Not to say that we do one at a time and that they're all equally, brutal. I think it gets easier as you go, but the first one takes all your energy. The next one takes a lot. It gets, I would suggest it gets easier because it gets momentum. Yeah.